we go any farther, can you give us a little history into the 160th?
Yeah. So in Iran, the Shah of Iran is in charge. He leaves. He's pushed out, really. And I can't remember if he was in France or the U.S., but we were supporting him. And so a group of student protesters protested outside the U.S. Embassy in Tehran, and they ended up taking it. Right? Now, from my understanding, they've done something like that before, but then they gave it back. In this case, they didn't give it back, right? So we had American hostages, Marines, embassy personnel, kept for, it was like 354 days or something like that. But, so there they are. And then President Carter, at the time, the military options were very few, right? JSOC didn't exist. All the special operations community had sort of disbanded after Vietnam, and Charlie Beckwith had just essentially stood up Delta Force, right? But they were going to send Delta Force in to rescue the American hostages. The problem was they got to get there. How are they going to get there? Helicopters. All right, well, what do we want to use to get there? Chinooks. The problem is you're getting by a Navy ship, right? Chinooks do not fold up handily like a Navy aircraft will, right? So they were afraid. OPSEC was a big concern. This is Operation Eagle Claw, right? So they don't want to put Chinooks on top of a ship because that'll raise questions. Why are there Chinooks on top of an aircraft carrier? That's not normal. So instead, they decided to use CH-53s, and they wanted to use the minesweepers, which were flown by Navy pilots. And they figured flying off a ship was the hardest part of the mission, right? Which, in hindsight, that's the easiest part. But so they do these rehearsals with Delta, and back then they didn't have this like one location where they did rehearsals and we sit face to face and we say, Sean, I don't like how you did this. Well, Al, I don't like how you did this. All right, let's adjust. It was all done. You're probably old enough to remember the teletype format. Like you get, if you ever get like a ship's position, the overhead message all comes like in a teletype. That's how they did their AARs, the after action reviews, right? It was through teletype. So there wasn't really plain English. It was kind of like, pilots sucked, but you can't really explain why, right?
Yeah.
So these guys are flying into the dust with night vision goggles, and it's super dark and there's no reference, right? And there's no like looking at blades of grass. So they came up with this, it's called a pink light, an infrared filter on top of a searchlight. So you extend your light out. It's a white light with basically a piece of brown waxed paper over it, held on with a little frame. And the problem was you could only see that light. So it's like you see with an AC-130 when they got the burn on, right? You can only see it with your night vision goggles. The problem is if you leave it on too long, it will burn through, and it will now be a white light, right? So you learn to use it very sparingly, which is funny because years later we were still like turn the light on, turn it back off, even though it was a glass thing. But the Delta guys were unhappy with the pilots. They crashed every single time, controlled crash. And so they wanted new pilots. So now they're like, all right, who else can fly a Navy aircraft? And the primary thing is landing in the dust. The Marines. Because the Marines do the ship to beach, right? The Navy guys do ship to ship, essentially. They're no better because they have no experience. And they have the same limitations. So they want to change the pilots again, but it's go time, right? So they got to go with what they got, right? So they execute, they fly the Delta guys in on 130s. They land at Desert 1, right? Designated desert landing area. And those 130s are going to transfer the Delta operators to the helicopters when they get there, right? Because the helicopters couldn't carry them that far and do the gas, so they came on the 130. So they'll do that. They'll get gas. They'll take the operators. They'll go to Desert 2, spend the day, and then do the mission, right? That's the plan. 8 helicopters take off, encounter a sandstorm that's like 4,000 feet high. You can't see in it, so they separate, right? So they're like, all right, they're 5 minutes apart, so they don't run into each other. I think a couple of them turned around for maintenance problems related to the dust. And The min force for the mission, I think, was 6, and they showed up with 6, except one was broken. They were down to 5, or it may have been 5 and 4. I can't remember. It's irrelevant. So they abort. We don't have enough helicopters to get them there. We have to abort. So the helicopters are going to go back to the ship. The Delta operator is going to get back on the 130s. They're going to go back. They're going to reset. They'll try again another night. The problem is, because they can't see, the helicopter pilots, you have, you've been to an airport on a jet airliner, you come into the gate and you get the guys with the colored wands, the light wands, and they're like, doing this kind of thing for the pilots to see, to direct them into the parking.
Yeah.
Well, you do that with helicopters, right? You get the wands and you kind of like come up to a hover, stationary, come left, come right, go, that kind of thing. You see that on ships all the time. So the guy that's doing that, so the helicopters crank up, they pick up to a hover. The guy with the wands is bringing them up and tells them to go. And then he walks toward the aircraft. And as I'm told, he put the wands in his pocket and they were still on. The only thing the pilots can see is the wands, the lighted wands, and they follow them. And the guy walked right into the C-130 and the helicopter followed him right into it. Impacted the C-130 full of 5,000 gallons of gas and a bunch of Delta operators that were kind of just hanging out. Aircraft explodes, helicopter explodes. It's mayhem. They all load up on the remaining 130s and they head back. Utter failure, national embarrassment. And so JSOC is born, right? Because the problem that they found was that because there was no habitual relationship between the air crews, the 130s, the ships, and the operators, you had all these problems. And so they created a unit, Task Force 160, out of Task Force 158 and some other things. So it was a National Guard unit with OH-6s, helicopters from the 101st, Chinooks, and Hueys initially, then Blackhawks. And they planned to do Operation Honey Badger, which was the second rescue attempt, right? So they're ready to do it. President Reagan gets in office. The Iranians release the hostages. No more mission for the JSOC operators. General Meyer, I believe it was the chief of staff, or maybe the chairman, and he said, you know what? You keep that unit together. So JSOC formed. The 160th became the 160th SOAG, Special Operations Aviation Group, and they stuck together. And then you had this habitual relationship that lasts today. And, we can do things now that they never dreamed, that could be done. But that's really where the 160th came from. And then, as it grew, out of the group, it became a regiment. And like when I got there were only 300 guys in the regiment. There's like 4,000 now.
Wow.
Because
really?
you have 3 battalions and then some special mission units. It's big. So when someone goes, hey, you were on the 160th, Bilbo Baggins? I'm like, what does he fly? I don't know. Okay, so.
What kind of birds do they fly on the 160th?
So all 3 battalions, I take that back, all 3 locations, Fort Lewis, Washington, or JBLM now, Joint Base Lewis McChord, they have Chinooks and Blackhawks. Savannah, Georgia has Chinooks and Blackhawks. And then Campbell is the anomaly. It's got Chinooks and Blackhawks, but it also has Little Birds, which have 2 variants, right? It's an OH-6, has an armed version and a assault version. So the MH is modified and AH attack. And then the Blackhawks have a assault version and what's called a DAP, direct action penetrator. So it's an armed Blackhawk. It's got a 30 millimeter chain gun. It can carry Hellfires, rockets, miniguns, sometimes all at the same time. Other times they have to make selections, based on weight, what they're going to carry. I have beautiful stories about DAPs. We'll probably touch on them a little bit. But that's the regiment.
Very cool. Wow. Thank you for that history.